spirit fullest control.
I'm Mike Costello, and I'd like to talk to you in the next few minutes about some techniques or ideas for dealing with sleepless nights. It doesn't matter who we are, we all from time to time seem to have difficulty sleeping, some of us more than others. And often we're challenged with how we deal with this situation. And one of the great things that we have in a sleepless night is the ability to deal with the dynamic of our mind and to create within ourselves the dynamic of a mind that brings us to a point of peace and of balance and harmony in life. When most of us were young, we were taught to say our prayers before we went to bed at night. And that was a good technique because in our lives, so often we spend the day in activities and dealing with circumstances and people and challenges, and we're moving. And when we move into the time of night, we move into a time of recharging, of rest, of relaxation. But for so many of us, because of the stress that we face in our lives, it's difficult at night to really come to a time of relaxation, a quiet time. One of the old techniques that we all know about is counting sheep, but that requires visualization, and that visualization sometimes is difficult. And so one of the things that I'd like to invite you to do when you deal with sleepless nights is to use this time in a productive and positive way, and to use it in a way, the way that your mother or your family told you to use it when you were a small child, and that is to pray, but to pray in a different way. So often we think of prayer as getting down on our knees or beginning a process of folding our hands and bowing our heads or lifting our heads and talking to God. But the process of prayer goes far deeper. And in our tradition, in the New Thought tradition, prayer and meditation go hand in hand. I'm not talking to you about changing your religious faith or your tradition in terms of your belief about prayer, but what I am going to share with you in this segment is some basic concepts in ways that you can deal with a sleepless night in a positive way, and you can deal with it in a prayerful and meditative state in a little different way than maybe you've thought of it in the past. I'd like to invite you to begin the process the next time you have a sleepless night, not even entering into a time of prayer in the conventional sense and the way that we think of prayer, but instead to begin a process of quieting your mind. And in the process of quieting your mind, directing the thought processes that you have. Now, these techniques work for prayer and meditation at night. They also work at any other time. But a sleepless night is a wonderful opportunity to try this particular technique. The technique begins with the simple process of going through the alphabet. And as you go through the alphabet, take each letter and let that letter begin a name or a circumstance or a situation for which you are thankful. Begin the process with A and B and C, and as you move through the alphabet, allow yourself to think about the things that you are thankful for. And that process of thankfulness puts your mind into a different gear, if you will. It moves your thought process in a different way. And so in that process of simply moving through the alphabet and with each letter choosing something that begins with that letter for which you are thankful, put your mind, your consciousness, and your awareness into a mode of thankfulness. And in that process, as you begin to be thankful for something. It may be that you have many things in life for which you do not choose to be thankful. But if you call into your mind, into your thought, those things for which you are thankful, what you're really calling into your consciousness, into your mind, are the blessings of life. And if I ask you to list the blessings of your life, it would be more difficult than it is to simply say the things for which you are thankful. And in this process, you're speaking to yourself. You're beginning to talk to yourself. You're beginning to embark upon what psychologists and sociologists today call self-talk. And as we begin self-talk, our minds begin to behave as the talk begins to move. And so by giving the alphabet the responsibility of creating thankfulness in your life, you'll begin this wonderful and magnificent dynamic that brings peace and tranquility to your heart and your mind and begins to allow you to relax and to release the stresses of life and to begin to enter into a time of rest and sleep. So that's the first process. Start with the alphabet. Go as far as you like. Start with A. Maybe you only go A, B, C, D. Maybe you go halfway through. Maybe you go all the way through. But allow yourself to go through the alphabet and choose those things for which you are thankful. It's not going to be as difficult as you think. There are many, many things for which you can give thanks and be thankful. And it doesn't have to be Thanksgiving to do that. So a sleepless night is a time to begin. After you enter into a time of reviewing alphabetically those things for which you are thankful, and you get into a mindset, into a mentality, into a process and dynamic of thankfulness and blessing, then the next step is to move in your thought process. And for those of you who haven't ever prayed, it doesn't even have to be thought of as a prayer. It needs to be simply a process of mind in which your thoughts and your thinking move through the experiences of life. So you begin with the alphabet and you begin with thankfulness. From there, begin to move into your thought process and allow yourself to identify the mistakes that you've made, not only in the past day, but in the recent past and in the distant past. No one is listening except God. No one is in the presence of your mind except you. Nothing is there but you and the power and the grace to come to a time of sleepfulness and of perfect rest. And so allow yourself to enumerate the mistakes and errors of your life. For traditional religious believers, this would be a time of confession. And you notice I didn't say confess your sins. I said say in your mind those things which you have done that you have believed to be mistakes or errors. Errors of judgment, things that you've said that you shouldn't have said, things that you did that you wish you hadn't done. Call those things into your mind. And as you call each experience into your mind, release it and let it go. For the dynamic and the technique of a sleepless night, this is a wonderful experience to enter into for the events of the day that is just ending. If you simply take the day that's just ending and in the quiet night, in the quiet of your own mind, begin to go through the mistakes and the errors that you made and to identify them and release them. I'm not saying that you ask forgiveness. I'm not saying that you do anything except call them into your mind, call them into your thought process, and then release them. Let them go. The next process after you release the mistakes and errors of the day, the next process into which you can move is that of thinking of or praying for other people. Again, in a Western or Christian tradition, these would be called prayers of petitions. But again, we're not talking about prayer in the conventional sense. So what we're inviting you to do is to call into your thought process, into your mind, those things, those thoughts that you have for other people. Perhaps it's the desire for someone to have a healing. Perhaps it's the desire for someone to have peace. Perhaps it's the desire for a child to have a success in an endeavor. Whatever it is, call into your thought the needs of that exist for other people and the needs that are on your heart and your mind for those people. Next, begin the process of thinking about the needs that you have for yourself and call those into the presence of your mind and into the presence of your heart. And in that process, open yourself up, talk to yourself. And remember, this is a dialogue that you're having within yourself. As we move through this process of beginning to cleanse our minds from the stress and the difficulties of daily life, we open the door with this concept of taking the alphabet and giving thanks, beginning with A, B, C, the thankfulness, the releasing of the mistakes and the errors that we've made in a day, and beginning to pray for the needs of others, the needs that have come into our mind for other people in our lives, and then thinking about our individual needs. We move from this place of busyness of mind and body into a place of tranquility and quiet. In the midst of this tranquility and quiet, after we've enumerated the blessings and the thanksgiving that we have, after we've thought about the errors and the mistakes of our lives, after we've thought of the needs of others and the needs that we have for ourselves, then simply go into a quiet time of introspection, of meditation, and allow yourself to be quiet And now that you've spoken all of these things, now that you've given thanks for things, now that you've thought of the needs of others and thought of the needs that you have in your life, allow yourself simply to be quiet. And in the center of this quietness, visualize peace and tranquility, perfectness of spirit, harmony and balance, and allow the reality of universal mind and consciousness, the power of God, if you will, to speak to your heart and to your mind. And what will come over you is a feeling of peace, of tranquility, and of unity. And in that process, you will be prepared for, or you will have already entered in to a time of sleep and rest and relaxation. The techniques that we've talked about have only to do with changing the way that you are thinking about circumstances and situations in life. And one of the best ways to change the circumstances and situations of your life is through prayer and meditation. There's nothing new about this concept. For many of us, praying or meditating are ideas and concepts that we don't embrace and that we don't feel comfortable with. So the best way to begin to embrace these concepts is to do so in quietness, in solitude, and in the privacy of your own home, of your own bed, of your own mind. And as you begin to embrace these concepts, what you're doing is exactly what you were told to do as a child. But the necessity is not to get on your knees. The necessity is not to go to a church. The necessity is not to light a candle or to view a picture or to do anything that stimulates your unity with God and the ability that you have to pray and meditate. Although all of those things are useful given their time and place. But in the evening, in the quietness of the night, is a great and wonderful opportunity for you and for me to embark upon this process of prayer and meditation. So the next time you have a sleepless night, utilize these techniques. Try this aspect of bringing yourself to peace and to harmony and to balance and to rest. And from it, you will go to sleep, and the process will bring you the rest that you need. So remember, go through the alphabet, giving thanks, release the mistakes and errors of your life, remember the needs of others, remember your own needs, and then move into a quiet place where you allow yourself to reflect upon those things that you have thought and asked for, and you open yourself to receive the peace and the tranquility that God wants for you to have every night of your life and every day as well. We believe in prayer as a centering force, meditation, and so we'd like to invite you at this point of the program to pause with us for a moment of reflection and of meditation. Eternal and loving God, we gather our hearts and minds together in the need that we have to sleep and to rest. And we know that as we enter into meditation and prayer, we have a tremendous ability to draw upon your universal resource of life, of peace, of strength, and of rest. And so we do this in the spirit of faith, in the spirit of hope, in the spirit of love. Amen.
Those were magnificent pointers that you gave for sleepless nights. And we all have sleepless nights, and some people have sleepless nights consistently. And I have a neighbor who seems to have sleepless nights all the time.
Yeah, and having a technique to deal with those sleepless nights is very important. And of course, there are a number of things that we can do to relax. We can read, we can watch the television, we can eat, or we can do whatever it is we choose to do. But I think that having an exercise that involves our mind and an exercise that can move us from the stress of life and from all of the challenges that we have to a point of peace is very useful.
Yes.
And for many people, as you well know, telling people to pray is not the solution because many people aren't comfortable with it. And so these basic techniques are really techniques of doing prayer or entering into prayer without calling it prayer. So
it's the same modality and the same results. And the pointers you gave were so valid, and most of us don't even think of those. And like going down the alphabet, making a game of that would be very relaxing. And I think many of us use the technique of praying for others, but your reminder to pray for them in a positive way was very helpful. Because we need to pray in a positive way.
We need to pray in a positive way. And we also, before we begin, so often I think when we were taught to kneel down and pray and say those prayers before we went to sleep, we were told by our mother or father or whoever was raising us that we needed to pray for others. And so we have this
Yeah.
great litany of the needs of others. And of course, we know all the funny things that children pray about. But if we begin the process through the technique that I shared of going through the alphabet in thankfulness, we don't begin immediately to draw upon the needs that we have.
Yes.
We don't begin to petition. We don't begin to intercede. We don't begin at those points. We begin with the process of giving thanks for whatever. And that technique of going through the alphabet can be all the way through the alphabet or just as far as we need to go. But it begins to set in our mind the reality of thankfulness, which, of course, as we said, is enumerating the blessings of our lives, which puts us in a positive state of mind.
Yeah. And sometimes I pray for those people who are close to me or who have asked for my prayers for good health, a long life, wisdom, prosperity, and peace. And by the time you say that for a lot of people, you've used a lot of time. Perhaps sometimes we might go to sleep from boredom.
If boredom works, that is all right too. But for
right.
so many people, it's such a challenge to be able to have to deal with this sleepless night.
Yes, yes, and by using the pointers you gave, surely they would help. They would solve the problem, because being relaxed is the primary need. And if they're worried about things, then they're not able to relax. And usually that's why people can't sleep. They're worried about whatever in their life that worries them. But if they follow your technique, then the worry is going to drop away, and their mind will be on other things. And as you say so well, we live in our minds and not in the world.
And the techniques of prayer really, or the technique of praying before we sleep, is very well founded from a psychological and spiritual standpoint, because it brings us out of our busyness of mind. And so the idea that we can live busy lives and stressful lives and challenging lives all day long, right up until 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and then finish it off with an hour of news, which brings us more stress in our lives, and then to go right to bed and believe that we'll go to sleep. And for many of us, we do, and thankfully I am able to sleep no matter what. But the ability to be able to shift our gears from the busyness of life into the tranquility of evening is important.
Yeah. I'm very grateful that I'm able to sleep easily too, and I go to sleep before my head hits the pillow. But I think probably one reason you and I do, and many other people, is because we use the techniques you said of not being worried, not watching TV just before bedtime, because it does stir up our consciousness and make us agitated. So if we use these techniques, which obviously we do, then they're going to help us sleep easily.
They can. Also, the news is a good technique for those who really are involved in prayer and meditation. As we've said so often at the church, Hattie Garlish, who was the foundress of our church in 1927, believed that the newspapers, and later when television came about, that the news was a wonderful opportunity for prayer. And of course, when you watch the news or read the newspaper, there's so many people and circumstances and places into which you can send peace and healing and strength and empowerment. One of the things that Hattie used to do that, and it again has to do with the way that our mind responds and reacts to circumstances and situations. It didn't matter where she was, on the street or in a car, whenever she heard an ambulance or heard a siren of any kind, she would utter an audible prayer for the people who were going, because she said that siren indicates that somebody's in trouble. And so it gives us a great opportunity to send strength and empowerment and guidance to those who are responding, protection to all of those along the way, and the grace and power of God to those who are in need at that point in time. And it isn't an aspect of taking control of a circumstance as much as it is the dynamic of surrounding it with the power and grace of God and allowing life to move in a positive way. And so the news is that way too. If we view the news, we're able to pray for it.
And should. That can be part of our ministry, whether we're ministers or not. It can be part of our ministry as a spiritual endeavor.
And we all have ministries. And even the most unreligious, if you will, of us, because we're all spiritual, even if we're not religious, and all of us have a ministry, and our ministry in life can be whatever it is that we're called to, or whatever it is that draws our interest. And in the midst, we can all have ministries of prayer.
Yes, that's a very important reminder. I know a lady who raised 12 children and she never attended church. She said she couldn't abide the churchianity, but there's never been a better Christian than that lady, and she was a wonderful mother and friend and so forth. But so just going to church doesn't.
No, going to church isn't important, and going to church won't make you sleep at night
I
any
know.
better. But some of the techniques that we talked about will help us to sleep and will help us to be peaceful. Now, some people find great peace by going to church.
I was just going to say that. I do it very selfishly because it centers me for the week. When I go to church on Sunday morning, it centers me for the week. And I always get something from the lesson, from the lecture, that I can apply to my own life. And so, and other people do too. I hear people say that at our church all the time when they hear you on Sunday morning, that it balances them out for the week. So again, I go to church on Sunday because it's a selfish measure on my own part.
And I do as well. And for those of us who, like yourself, who are in the front of the church, and those who are in the pew, go because it gives them something and it feeds a need that they have. And many people don't have that need and they find it elsewhere. But for me, the church is where I find it. And of course, I go to church not only because I need to, but because I like to. And when I speak, as I'm sure when you speak as well, we speak for ourselves as much as we're speaking for the needs of the congregation. And so it is always an outgrowth of the Spirit of God speaking to us and through us and allowing us to channel or bring forth whatever is needed for ourselves and for others.
Exactly. And one thing church does, if we go to church regularly, it centers us. It helps us be centered, and we can stay centered a long time after once just being truly centered. And that's what it does, I think, for people. And if I could offer some advice to our audience, I would say, make sure you stay centered. Keep on your own center. Don't give away your own power. And how do we become empowered? By staying centered, and through all the techniques you just gave us are helpful hints on how to stay centered, because that's what it really amounts to.
And if we can't be centered at any other time, the ideal situation is for us to be able to draw upon that center all of the points of need in our life. But the best time to get good at centering ourselves is at night, because there are less influences that are external, there's more quiet, there's dark, and there's peace. And spiritual strength is like any aspect of physical strength. It comes through exercise. And if we exercise our ability to come to our center, to our peaceful center and presence every night, or especially in the nights when we have stress, then we begin to be better at calling upon that center and calling ourselves into that center at the points of great need in our lives.
Yes. And that's what we just have to do that if we're going to have healthy, happy lives. Another good exercise in the evening is retrospection. And we're taught and teach that we need to exercise retrospection. And a good time is the last thing at night. So if we do that, that's a relaxing exercise, because we go through the day in an unjudgmental way, seeing what we did that we might have done differently, not to hit ourselves over the head, but just to see how we might have done it differently. And if we do that, then we grow in stature, because we remember, if we've reviewed something we've done that we wish we hadn't said or done, then the next time that occasion arises, we remember it. It's part of our consciousness. And so retrospection is very important. I couldn't impress on people enough the importance of that exercise.
Tremendously important, and it becomes for us a wonderful learning experience and also a freeing experience.
Yes, both. And it's said that when we first die, when we go over in death, we have to review our lives from that moment backward to the beginning of that particular lifetime and then forward again. Well, if we do that every night, it's been said, then we don't have to spend as much time on the inner when we die, but we can use that energy for other things.
And we're able to be better at the process of self-examination or introspection. And so that process is very, very important.
Yes, because then we need that exercise, we need that process, because we have to learn when we die and go over in death. We have to learn from the experiences, and that's why we do it. It's not a judgment on us, and it's not a penalty, but we're learning from that. And as you just said, then we're learning nightly.
We're learning nightly to die. And we die each night to each day. And we die at the end of this life to this life experience. And so each day is a capsule of our earthly pilgrimage or experience. And by self-examination, we're able to look at the events of the day, we're able to look at ourselves and do an assessment, if you will,
Yeah.
and at the end of our life, we'll be doing that. And so, as you said so well, and a fundamental part of New Thought is that it's not God's judgment. The judgment at the end of our life is simply a spiritual reality and a law, and the judgment becomes our own judgment
Yes.
of ourselves,
Yeah.
and then our collaboration, if you will, or the sharing of that information with the Spirit of God and those on the other side who help us to learn from the experiences of life, and especially to learn from the errors and to be willing and able to release what's happened.
That's the important part, and you mentioned that very strongly, the release aspect. And if we don't release, then we're not going to be able to sleep, because we have to relax enough to and release whatever it is.
And releasing experiences seems to be a very difficult thing for so many of us, because we hold on tenaciously to those things, even the things that hurt.
Yeah.
And to be able to let go of them and to forgive ourselves and to decide that we did or said something we ought not to have said, and resolve not to do it again, to learn from it.
Or tenaciously hanging on to our own ideas as being the only viable idea. Because I know you've done a lot of counseling, and when you counsel two people who are at opposite poles, then they never can see each other's viewpoint, and it's always he said, she said, or they said. And it's if we can just drop that and look at the other person's viewpoint, we can release ever so much more.
Absolutely important to what we're doing, and releasing the power and releasing the difficulties of life and releasing all of our stress is part of the process of having a sleepful night. So Reverend Freelander and I have been sharing with you ideas on dealing with a sleepless night. We hope you found this information to be useful. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Light comes from the Spirit with glorious light. Confident living cleanses my soul, giving the Spirit fullest control. Confident living rights every wrong. Dynamic power helps me be strong. Confident living comforts my heart. From such a blessing I can't depart.